So again, I want to acknowledge Danny Richter's presentation because he really talked about the importance of the work that we are doing as volunteers. So first, we are going to do a poll so that I can orient my comments based on your knowledge of the CIAT, our action team. So Ryan, let's do the poll. This should take a minute or two.
Poll is up.
The submit button isn't working on the poll.
Okay.
Oh,
Mine worked.
Oh, I see. There's more questions. Okay.
Yeah, you have to scroll down till you get to the bottom.
Okay. Okay. Now I see the problem. Thanks. Like I said, I'm a newbie to this.
Okay, good.
We're up to 23 of 30. So we're still waiting on 7 more. We'll give everyone about 30 more seconds.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, please mute yourself. You can ask questions later, but please mute yourself now.
About 15 more seconds, so try and wrap those polls up if you can.
Okay, great. All right, well, this is really helpful. I can see that the majority of CCLers have been doing this less than 5 years. And not many have attended a meeting, which is good because we can talk about that, but I do encourage you to join our action team. We have 117 people on it now. And are you familiar with our public folder? We're going to go over that. So that's good that not very many people know about that. And have you researched or engaged with Grasstop's organizations? So I see 42% yes. That's terrific because we can learn from them about the things they've done that were successful and other things that aren't working very well. And those of you who said no, we can help you with that. So we're good. So I'm going to chop that out of the way. Okay. So thank you for sharing your responses on that. That was great. So it appears that we have a mix of experiences. So I'll cover the basics and also share some new insights that I have gotten from CAIT members. So first, I'm going to go over the sections of this talk and your participation. So I will take you to the CIAT homepage on community. Then I will click on the CIAT public folder link so you can get to that. We are going to have a breakout session to gather your ideas, talk more about that in a minute. After that, we will come back together to talk about what you discussed in your breakouts. Then we will go look at a website called govtrack.us and another one called Open Secrets, because I find govtrack.us is a really great tool. I use it a lot in order to understand what's going on in Congress, particularly the Congress people that I'm looking at. Then we'll look at the CIAT survey. We did a survey of, well, I got 50 surveys back from coastal districts around the United States, which shows, if you did the survey, it shows where there are commonalities between different congressional districts regarding climate impacts. And then we're going to talk about how to find grass tops, okay? So I'm going to share a screen, and we're going to go to the, I'm going to get out of here, okay. So we're going to go to the Coastal Impacts Action Team homepage. And because a lot of you are new, I'm just going to go step by step. So if you get on our website, the CCL website, and click Take Action, go to CCL Community, which everybody's a member of. And then you can go to Connect, and you can go to Action Teams. Click on that. And down here, you will see, where is that? Coastal Impacts Action Team. And then if you just look around this whole page, there are a lot of really great action teams that may relate to, you know, your religion or your activities like outdoor activities or creative writing, the business climate leaders, or if you're interested in coal. So I would just, if you're new, particularly, just go around these, pick out ones that are interesting to you and find out what they're doing. So I'll go to, I can go to my dashboard, but anyway. So this is the Coastal Impacts Action Team, and I'll give you a quick rundown on that. On the right here, we have upcoming events. So I have 2 meetings every month. One is a steering committee meeting, which anybody is welcome to if they'd like to give us advice about where we should be going with our work. And the other is our monthly meeting, which this coming up in February is the 16th. It's the second Tuesday, no, it's the first Tuesday after the second Saturday. So you look on the calendar, this month you'll see that there are 2 Saturdays, and then the 16th comes after that. So so it's the first Tuesday after the second Saturday. Okay. Over here is where we used to put in files a lot of documents. I do not put anything in there anymore because we've created a new portal for information, which is a Google Drive site. And so to get to that Google Drive site, you just go down here to more information. You click on this right here. And that brings up the CIAT public folder, okay? And within that, we have these subfolders. They're called folders rather than subfolders, but anyway. So I mentioned, and I'm gonna just really fast go through these. I mentioned the Coastal Impacts Survey, okay? So I created a survey and I sent it out to all the different chapters. Why isn't this coming up? There we go. I sent it out to about 117 different chapters, and I got 50 back, which was great. And if you aren't on that list, please, please do it. But anyway, if you look here, we have Alaska, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, all the way down, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, Washington, all these, okay? And I've highlighted New Jersey partly because a lot of you are from New Jersey today. Here's the name of the congressperson, the chapters, contact people, emails. And then over here, I had made a list of all the different impacts that I could think of that were happening in coastal districts. And then people wrote in either yes, no, or maybe that they have that particular problem in their district. So here is a way that you can find out what other chapters or what other districts in our country have that problem. So let's just choose this one. If we go over here to this little arrow, click on that and sort this Z to A. That's because if you do it Z to A, then the yeses come up, right? So we go Z to A. Now we have this sorted, and these are all the yeses, right? So these refer to all the other coastal districts that have this problem, right? So if you guys are thinking that this is the coastal impact, one of the coastal impacts that you want to focus on and bring this to the attention of your member of Congress or your senators, then it's very possible that people down in Florida or other parts around the country, North Carolina, places like that, they have also been thinking about, you know, are there organizations in our community that maybe have a regional or a national footprint, and are other chapters working with them? Are they learning from them? Okay, so this is where the idea of working across the congressional district lines and regionally to bring different members of Congress together. One of the important things that we can do. Okay, now let me go backwards. Now, so then there's a coastal impacts folder. And in here, I just listed all those that were on the survey, plus I added a few. And we are developing resources in here. So for example, if you click on sea level rise, then up comes some information that we found that some people like you have found and wanted to upload on here. If you want to upload something, I need to give you permission as an editor, which I will do. So you need to send me an email, and then I will give you permission, and you can upload stuff to one of these categories. And that's really going to be helpful for other people in other places. Like here's one, it's a PowerPoint about flooding in Florida, but that would be relevant in many other districts around the country. So I'm going to get out of this and get out of this. Okay, now we're going to look at coastal states. So this, click on this, these are all the coastal states in the United States. And again, if you click on it, I'm going to click on Delaware because Ted Sickler has been phenomenal about uploading information on this website about different aspects of flooding and coastal risks. And I will also do North Carolina just to show you that here's an article about blue-green algae. That's a very big problem that they're experiencing down in North Carolina. It turns out that there are another dozen or 2 dozen chapters or districts around the United States that also are wondering how they're going to solve this blue-green algae problem, which is a big economic negative in a lot of places. So let me get out of that. So over here, I have some information about senators and House representatives. Created a list of all the senators that are in districts that are along the coast. And then I sorted through all the different committees that these senators could be on. And I did not post committees that don't have anything to do with climate change. But here, what this shows you is, take banking, let's say, take the armed services, for example. We know that the military is very concerned about climate change. So by sorting through by sorting this list by yes, then we can see what other Congress people, right, what other senators are actually on that committee. And if it happens to be your senator, like North Carolina, for example, or New York, then we could start thinking about how we're going to get a conversation going with those, between those people. I also have a series of spreadsheets that I put together quite a while ago, and they are not updated. These are not updated. They are for the 116th Congress, but we will get to that. But the thing I wanted to show you is under legislation, because there's a bunch of different tabs here. I'm keeping track of all the people who have co-sponsored our bill, or Deutsche's bill. And again, this is the 116th Congress, but presuming that all these people are going to come back. Here they are alphabetized by state. You can see California, and it goes down through Washington State. And here they are alphabetized by last name. And this Y is, are they a member? Is their district a coastal district? So again, you could start looking through this and recognize that there are, similarities or potential information that you could get from the chapters about how was it that they were able to get their congressperson to co-sponsor the bill. Because I think we have a hidden gold mine in all these different chapters or districts that already have gotten their congressperson to do that. And then over here, we talked about Brian Fitzpatrick a minute ago. He's my congressperson. He's not in favor of our bill at the moment because it does not do anything for unions, and he gets a lot of support from unions, and we want to figure out a way of getting union jobs as part of the, working on climate change. So he has the Market Choice Act, but this is he only has 3 people on it now. Rooney actually did not run again, so he's not in Congress anymore. So I'm just keeping track of things like that as a way of knowing who we might want to reach out to. Okay. And then under this resources, climate science information, I have a couple of really great things. This gentleman, Randy Freed, gave a talk at, on one of our chapter meetings a couple of months ago. Wonderful PowerPoint, which I recommended you use. And then he, coming out of this PowerPoint, he put together this resource list. It'll come up in a second. There it is, which shows you lots of different websites where you can learn more about the science behind climate change. And I would recommend for anybody who has flooding interior on the coast or anywhere, literally anywhere in the country, even if it's, this in Colorado or somewhere that's not close to the ocean. Flood Factor is a very good website to go to. Climate Central, which of course is in New Jersey, that organization, they have a lot of interesting things. So this is a place if you want to learn more about climate change and also the impacts regionally or granularly to literally to the address of somebody on a street in a town somewhere. You can find that by going into some of these things. Okay, so let me see. All right, let me see where I am with this. Okay, so I'm going to get out of this. So are there any questions that anybody wants to ask me right now? If not, I'll keep going.
I'm just going to ask you real quick, could you just go back to see how you got to the files section? Because I got it, the action team, but...
Okay. Let's see. Where am I? Okay, here we are. Let me just back up. Okay, so you get to this place. My dashboard automatically comes up, but if you go to connect, that'll take you to your action team location. You click on that. I'm just going to click on my dashboard. And you come down to Coastal Impacts Action Team, you click on that. Then in the About Us column, you just scroll down till you see the first thing in red under more info. And when you click on that, that takes you to the public folder. And then once you get there, you'll see the various subfolders with, that we just went through. Is that what you, Steve?
Do you selectively put some files in the file section of community?
I don't put anything in there anymore because
It's up to you.
it's much easier to find stuff, and it's also much easier for people to upload things directly to the Google Drive because I can make them an editor.
Right.
They can do it on their own. Like Ted, he uploaded all that stuff for me. It saved me a lot of time. So I'm not using files anymore. It's too difficult. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to have a breakout session. Okay, so welcome back,
There we
everybody.
go.
I presume everybody is back again. Karen Diorazio is working on my support team, and she is going to be taking notes about what you guys are going to relate back from your breakout sessions. So if you were in a breakout, we were all in breakout sessions. So if you were taking notes, or if you remember what was mentioned about, what clues you have to identifying people who are influential to your congressperson, if you want to raise your hand, I'll call on you, and then Karen is going to take notes. So we'll have a list about that. Who would go first? There's Karen.
Yeah, I'm on. Let me just do mine first because I'm cheating. I already put it down on the list. So I'll get a
Okay,
head
go ahead.
start. So our group, I think we were group 1, and we said newspaper. You can learn a lot actually at the lobby meeting. A newsletter from your MOC, you might be on your MOC's mailing list, kind of the same thing. Social media, the MOC's website, talk to other CCL members, and campaign flyers.
Who else wants to relate some ideas? Charlie, go ahead. You're muted, Charlie.
We talked about labor unions, church people, progressive Democrats groups, and environmental issues, or environmental leaders generally, I think, were some key points we've noted.
Yeah, those are good ones. I like those. Who else wants to raise their hand? Blake?
Yes, thanks. We talked about our problems getting any interaction with our congressman who is Republican and who is in a very safe seat and rarely visits the district. So he is a devout Catholic, and we have been trying to find a route through the Catholic Church, maybe that we might be able to interact with him. And,
Who is that? Who is that?
Chris Smith.
Oh yeah, sure, exactly.
And he actually lives in Virginia. He doesn't. His family lives in Virginia, and his kids go to school there, and so on. So we don't see a lot of him. But the suggestion was that we have a look at his website, see if we can find some non-political thing that he's interested in. A member of our group, May, and I've forgotten her last name, who established a relationship with Chuck Schumer, no less, when she wrote to him about wolves. She was interested in, found out that he was very interested in wolves. And I guess there was a political issue about maybe restoring wolves in Western states. But they established a connection that exists to this day. He still knows her, I guess. And so that's a good possibility. We'll have to go outside of politics probably to reach out to him.
That's a really, really interesting story. And it's sometimes something like that makes that connection happen. And then if we can say, okay, well, wolves, for example, are under threat because of changing climate, figuring out a way to make that connection
Sure.
Some people will change their attitudes about something because they have an emotional connection with that thing, right?
Right.
So in making that emotional connection can be the key that unlocks that. That's a really great story. Someone else want to raise their hand? Ted, go ahead.
You know, I have a story like, oh, wait a minute. Am I
Go ahead,
talking?
Ted.
I'm,
Yeah, you're
I'm
talking.
open.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. That we have a very similar story in lower West Virginia. We have a state Republican senator that's in the state Senate. And he's generally regarded as somebody who's not interested in climate change at all, but he's got a favorite place in Sussex County, and it's a local state park. And he's always there. He's always raking up the trails, and he has a group of fanatic park volunteers who have become very close to him. And so we're all flocking to help this park and keep it clean and so on. And we promote his interest in the park. And that gives us an in, something nice that we can say and tell him how much we appreciate what he does for this park.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, Ted. That's great. I'm flipping back between one screen and another, so I don't want to miss anybody's hand.
I think Ren also raised her hand.
Ren, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just share what we haven't covered from our group. We mentioned open secrets. We talked about tracking what bills they've supported and who they've worked on with those bills, even if they're not climate bills, just to see what kind of relationships there are. We also mentioned how effective it can be just to straight up ask either the representative or their staff, like, who influences you, or, you know, who would you like to hear from? It was mentioned that some representatives are actually offering like virtual town halls right now. And that's a way to engage and learn more about what they're trying to talk about. And that you can also like get notifications when they appear in the media. So that's one way to just kind of track what kind of media attention they're seeking out and getting.
Wow, those were great. Thank you. Somebody else want to raise their hand? Janet, did you want to say anything?
I know one thing, besides talking about engaging the politicians, I remember I had mentioned it personally, is environmental groups such as Audubon that do a lot of lobbying for environmental issues. And I know a lot of these groups have chapters in different states, much like the CCL does.
Great, thank you. Edie, did you want to mention anything? You were in our group.
Well, no.
Well, let me just say that you mentioned that you have a lot of knowledge about flooding and issues like that because of your job, right?
Right. And so
wondering if there is a connection between your professional knowledge and something, right?
Right. And so, you know, I've worked with doing the flood insurance rate maps that FEMA produces. And so we look at the flooding, the coastal impacts. I actually had an opportunity to speak about it at last year's conference, what FEMA is seeing, projecting in the future, what's going to happen along the coastlines, as well as riverine flooding, but, you know, with the coastlines. And being able to take that information and relay it to our representatives, to you know, Congress. That's kind of information I can share and say, you know, this is what the experts say. Like I have access to information from our subject matter experts that counsel FEMA on what they see is happening with coastal flooding and with climate change. And that type of information is something that can be shared when I have a platform with someone.
You know, that relates to something I wanted to say later on in my talk, but one of the things I was interested in is identifying congressional districts that received FEMA money because of like a major storm or something like that, and whether or not our Congress people really know how much money has to flow into a particular district in order to make those repairs. They might not really know what impact the government, is having.
Well, FEMA has to go to Congress to get our funding, via the Stafford Act. So they know how much we're regularly requesting to fund our activities. So they know just how much money it costs. We have to go back. FEMA as an agency has to go back to them and ask them for additional funding. When we have these big events like the Maria, Irma, Michael, hurricane, that kind of walloped the Caribbean and the Gulf and Eastern parts of the country, everyone has to kind of say, we need to get that money out there. So our congressional representatives, they do know. Also, when it comes to the mapping of the areas that are prone to flooding, it does become a very political issue because the insurance program, runs out of money. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have now is adequately funding the flood insurance program so that people are covered. You have some areas of the country that are more prone to flooding and more prone to the impacts of hurricanes and big storms. And those areas of the country that are more prone to drought and not so much flooding, unless it's an unusual event. And so the representatives for these areas that are more prone to having, especially the coastal impacts, you look at the eastern part of the country, the western part of the country, and the southern part of the country, right? Almost guaranteed something will happen in the Atlantic, the Pacific, or the Gulf. So those representatives definitely know that their constituency is prone to flooding. Texas has challenges, Florida has challenges. The Atlantic seaboard is beginning to have more and more challenges. And now we're looking at what's going to happen along the Pacific coast. So they know, they definitely know.
Great, thank you, Edie, that's really terrific. Lynn, did you raise your hand? You need to mute yourself.
I had a question for Edie. Are the FEMA maps overlaid with the maps, like the public health maps that show most vulnerable communities? I went to a workshop a couple of years ago from the public health aspects of climate change, and they know by zip code where the more vulnerable communities are to any effects of climate change, heat related, whatever. But I was wondering if that's correlated with the FEMA maps, because it seems to me it's an environmental justice issue as well.
So the correlation, maybe not the right word. And I'm no way trying to take over this, but so FEMA looks at multi-hazard mapping. So that is something that we've talked about. And especially now that we've been brought into the COVID response, we are looking at multi-hazard mapping and how we can identify different vulnerabilities from different types of disasters. And so geographical information systems, GIS, when we use those mappings, we can kind of create these layers that identify where different challenges are for the country.
Great, thanks, Edie. I think we're going to have to
GIS, thank you.
On a little bit. We have about 30 minutes left on this half-hour meeting, but thank you. That was great information. Karen, you have put together the list. Do you have everything on there that you need?
Yeah, you'll see some typos, but but let me get it over to you now. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to put it in, it's a Google Doc, so I'll put it in present mode, so you should be able to see it better.
Great, thank you.
Let me do
Let's just
this.
put that up for a minute or two.
Yeah. And let me put it into present.
Oh, great. Wow.
Can you see that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
terrific. Wonderful.
So Thad put the open secret training doc into the chat. Could you add the link to the doc as well?
Oh, to this one? Yeah, I can't do it right now, but as soon as I come out of there and get back into the other mode, I'll do that.
Great. I think that's a great list. That's a really good place to start. Okay, so let's take that down because I'm going to need to use this screen in a minute.
Here we go.
Okay, so that was really good, and we'll make sure that that list gets onto the CIAT public public folder under resources. I think we went to that subfolder there. Okay, so now I'm going to share a screen about govtrack.us because this is a really terrific website, and we're going to just show you how this works. Okay, so govtrack.us started as a guy in his kitchen, started tracking Congress, and now it's turned into this totally amazing thing. So if you go up here to the search, and I'm going to type in Chris Smith because he was mentioned a minute ago. So here comes Chris Smith, New Jersey 4. You click on that, and up he comes. And this is information about him, which is updated pretty much on a daily basis. So I'm just going to run through a little bit about this. If you want to view his map, you click on there. If you want to look at open secrets or some of these other informational sources, you can click on this. And here comes Chris Smith. And then there's all these categories. So if you look at contributors, for example, just as one example. So he raised almost $600,000. And then here are all these different organizations and the dollar amounts, right? So these are the Grasstop's people or organizations that are influential to him, right? Because they're giving him the money that makes up that $600,000. So, you know, for example, here's Station Casinos. I have no idea who they are, but if it's casinos, then they typically have their casinos along the coast where they are vulnerable to all kinds of impacts. And they employ a lot of people. So maybe that's, you know, a place to look. But you can decide with your chapters, you know, who might know somebody, let's say in the Pipe Fitters Union or one of these other organizations. So this is as an example of going on to different websites that track what Congress people are doing in order for you to identify organizations that you might want to do. Now, here's a really interesting graph that I look at very, very often. So when you bring up the name of a congressperson, as in Chris Smith, then his symbol is a triangle, a purple triangle. So you can see where he is. Now, this has an ideological score. So the further you go this way, the more conservative you are as a Republican and more liberal as a Democrat. And your leadership score is they track how many bills do you sponsor and how many people co-sponsor your bills, or do you co-sponsor their bills, right? So you can see that in the Congress, he's actually a leader in the sense that he's sponsoring a lot of bills, but he's also moderate in his conservatism. I find it very interesting he doesn't live in the district. But if you find another congressperson that you're interested in, you can actually click on this button and it will take you to his page, just like Chris Smith's page. Now, what I find interesting about this is that if I was trying to get co-sponsors to a bill, then, and let's say Chris Smith was a co-sponsor of it or the lead on it, then I would probably look for other people who are in this first column here, as opposed to way, way out here or way, way out there, right? Because they're not really ideologically the same as Chris Smith. They may be way, way too more conservative. So over here, for example, or these people here, these are very, very conservative Republicans who are moderately, you know, in the leadership category. So when a couple of years ago in 2015, when we had a lot of Republicans and people, Democrats signing up for the Climate Solutions Caucus, Then I did a dot graph, and I actually put a little tab next to every one of those dots, which was a co-sponsor of that bill. And guess what? Almost everybody was right in this center area right here, in these two columns right here. So it seems to me that if you're going to be putting a lot of effort into trying to get co-sponsors for our bill, we ought to be looking in the region of these dots where you can find them. So that's something to think about when you're working with, you're looking for people that might be influential on your congressperson. Then down here, these are ratings from advocacy organizations. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce just supported our bill, or the idea of a project. So he gets a 73% rating. So maybe talking to him about the Chamber of Commerce would be something worth doing. And then the League of Conservation Voters, he's actually the second most environmentally conscious conservative compared than the second most, the second highest rating on this website. And guess who? Brian Fitzpatrick, my congressperson, is number one at 83%, and Chris is number two. So that between these two things here, there may be some kind of influence that we can do. Now, what is missing from this website right now is what committee he is on, because the 117th Congress has not yet released who is on what committee. But normally there would be a tab here which says the committees that he's on. But here you can see what kind of bills he tends to work on and sponsor. So maybe there's something, for example, in international affairs, because our bill has to go through the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I'm not aware if he is on that right now. I should know that. But if he is, then that's a whole nother way that we could start looking at groups that have to do with the Foreign Affairs Committee and try to work with them to influence him in his role as congressperson. Okay. So now I'm going to go to, hold on for a second. I'm going to type in Harris, and you see Andy Harris is from Maryland. So he comes up. Again, there's no information about the organization, the committees yet. There is also a report card. It's kind of fun to read that. But if you look at where Harris is, he's in this column right here. All right, he's pretty conservative, and he's not really that as engaged as some Congress people are in terms of co-sponsoring other people's bills. So this is going to be a tough one. But again, if you start looking around in this area of this chart, or going across horizontally in this area of the chart, you may find somebody in here that he could link to that has had some kind of climate catastrophe. You could reach out to some, if you try to find if these people are on the coast, then maybe there's some similarity they have had with, let's say, a major hurricane event or a big drought event or something like that. So those are the ways that I look for support from other CCL chapters by looking at these little dots here and trying to figure out where to go for that. Okay. And now let's just go up here to one more we're going to do. So this is Lisa Blunt Rochester. She's, as you know, from Delaware. They have one congressperson because of their population. But you can see where she is on the chart. She's middle of the road Democrat. She's very busy, but she doesn't sponsor a lot of bills. But again, there may be here, for example, United States Chamber of Commerce. He has about the same rating that Chris Smith has. So maybe, and here's Conservation Voters. As a Democrat, she's very high. She votes for almost every environmental bill. But again, there may be, within those bills, there may be a way that Chris Smith and she, especially because we are, their states are next to each other. The Delaware Bay is a central thing, very important resource. So maybe there's a collaboration that could happen based on knowledge about that. So this is how I use this chart to see what that is all about. And I'll just bring up Fitzpatrick, who is my congressperson, Brian Fitzpatrick, and I just wanted to say one thing about him. When I started this, looking at this in 2015, Brian Fitzpatrick was solidly in this section right here. He was right in the middle, and look where he is now. He's moved to the right pretty significantly, even though, but his leadership has gone up by, used to be leadership down here, and then it was in here, and now he's on the third tier. So it's interesting to see that he's popular with people in Congress. They sponsor his bills, or he sponsors theirs, but he has moved to the right in certain respects. Okay, so that's a great resource. Okay, so I did that. Okay, so now we're going to do another breakout session for just a few minutes. We have about 25 more minutes to go. And you can introduce yourself if you have new people in it. Let me stop sharing. We have about 12 minutes for this. And my question is, what are the impacts in your district that are most likely to resonate with Grasstop's organizations or individuals? So just as a reminder, if you don't know, CCL came up with this concept of Grasstops. Now we all know what grassroots are, right? Like I'm a grassroots person. I work at the bottom of the thing. Try to give people information about Citizens Climate Lobby or other information in our community, right? But Grasstops are people that if your congressperson received a phone call from them, he would pick up the phone, right? If they asked for an appointment, they could get an appointment next week instead of a month from now, right? They are leaders in the community. They are maybe a union official or a church leader. It could be a big business that has a lot of employees or things like that. So these are people that are influential in their community, and they get written up in the newspaper and stuff like that. So my question is, what do you think are the most important impacts from climate change in your districts that might resonate with Grasstop's persons? Okay, so let's come back. Karen, are you ready to take some notes?
Yeah, let me just get a little bit more ready, and then I can do that. And my cat is trying to eat the cord from my headset here. You see, so we want to entitle that, we're looking for influence. How, who would be?
So the question was, what impacts, what climate impacts are most likely to resonate in your district with, your Grasstops people, and then how do we use that, right? So who wants to go first? Did somebody take notes? Steve Whelan, did you take notes, or did you? Okay, you're muted.
I saw Lynn raise her hand first, so I could go.
Oh, okay. Where's Lynn? I didn't
remember.
Yeah, Lynn, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. I guess you can hear me. Sea surge, we had in Superstorm Sandy, the sea surge went very far inland, and it was a long time, and it ruined a lot of businesses. So we think that would be something. Tidal river could be a longer term in some cases in Pennsylvania, but also some of our inland communities were inundated with the tidal rivers and flooding, and that meant a lot of businesses were out of business or had big expenses in repair. Nuisance flooding in downtown, businesses have had to close in some cases, gotten worse in the last 20 years. Homeowners, because of coastal flooding and other flooding, we all kind of wished that we had more input from real estate people, you know, instead of just kind of holding the line. A big thing was healthcare, because climate change affects on people's health, including ER visits on hot days. And then that led to thinking about justice issues with people not able to afford air conditioning. So they're affected much worse by heat, for example. Let's see, we mentioned inland flooding, agriculture, saturated ground because of agriculture. So that's too much rain. And then of course, sometimes there's drought, so not enough. And fisheries decline in some species, and the oysters because of the acidification.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay.
Who else would like to report?
Janet raised her hand, so.
Yeah, Janet, go ahead.
Yeah. A lot of it, it's almost what Lynn said, that we had people in our group from Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania. I'm from New Jersey, and a big consensus was a lot of problems with floodings. And I know we look at the seaboard, which is, you know, horrendous for that, but also, you know, rivers, like I don't remember the rivers they mentioned in the other states, but in New Jersey, you have the Hackensack, the Passaic, and there with the increased rain we've been having over the few years, they're constantly overflowing their banks, and there's a lot of damage.
Thank you. Steve Whalen, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just real quickly, one of the things that was talked about was an area in New Jersey on casinos that were employ a number of different people, and where particularly when they're on the coast there, some of the influence that sea level rise would have there. An example was given about responding to queries from staffers, following up on research questions that'll help them really position themselves with their colleagues and actually with constituents. So the question was, can you give me a track record of Republican representatives who have voted any more than 3 or above for environmental issues? And so Tom actually went through what kind of the research he went through GovTrax. Environmental ratings groups, if you remember, were down there, but from GovTrax you can find out who does those sort of ratings, and kind of get a summary of where, beyond your just your congressman, you know, how would you get those groups to evaluate your representative? And also national defense was brought up as an area where, particularly in Maryland anyway, there are a number of facilities that are threatened through sea level rise. And finally, leveraging county and municipal leadership, seeing what measures have been taken, either resolutions or commitments to climate goals, and making sure that that is well known, and encourage the people on those councils to contact your congressman to let them know what their position is.
Right, those are all really good. All really good. Does anybody else have something to add from your group? Go ahead, Karen. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. There are just a couple, there's a lot that's already been covered from, because we talked about flooding of, river flooding. Also, we talked about the actual, environmental impacts on the bay when you start to see, where you might have an oil leak or some sort of, damage to the ecosystem there. Then we also spoke about healthcare facilities near water. You know, particularly in New Jersey, we talked about that, but I know also for myself, NYU Medical Center was inundated, well, now it's Langhorne, you know, during Hurricane Sandy. So you have vulnerable healthcare facilities there. Let me see. We talked about transportation. Then we also talked about something a little bit different in terms of the environmental impact, you know, of, you know, it's kind of a both affects climate change, but just the pollution that causes the issues with climate change also causes asthma, it causes health effects, to, you know, to people living in cities. So how, you know, how do you mitigate those? Then we also talked, well, we also talked about, you know, finding out how climate impacts might impact, you know, local universities and getting a connection there.
Those are all really good. So one of the things.
And Tom Popecki raised her hands. Do you
Oh, I'm
want
sorry.
her to
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Peggy?
Oh, okay. What I was in Karen's group, and I failed to mention something that I think is important in Delaware, and that is we've had a lot of saltwater incursion, not only just coming up from the groundwater, but also over, you know, flowing over the actual farmland. And agriculture is the #1 industry in Delaware, and it seems like that would resonate with our big deal people.
Right. And, you know, not to generalize too much, but farmers tend to be more conservative. And so that's an interest group that we would really like to work with. And yesterday, I think it was the plenary session, there was, or maybe this one of the second sessions on agriculture and fisheries, which I attended. And there were 3 or 4 farmers from the coast, and they were talking about the conservatism in the Delmarva Peninsula and in New Jersey amongst farmers because, you know, changing climate, but also trying to change techniques for farming can be hazardous because if it doesn't work out, you know, you could lose your crop or even your whole farm. But that is a group that we really need to address, I think, and get on board. Is there anybody who has a connection to farmers in your state or your district? Sarah, did you raise your hand? No. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I actually, I do social media for a barbecue restaurant, but through that, they only, he also does wholesale meat. So he gets all of his meat from, it's a Greener World certification process, and they just got their certification label for regenerative farming. Wow. So he buys all of his meat from, it's like 13 or 14 farmers around North Carolina. And so because I'm doing the social media for him, I've gotten to interview the farmers. So it's been a really awesome connection to have. And these farmers are, you know, they're already doing organic farming. They already have their non-GMO labels. They're already ready and willing to do. So the regenerative farming labels is the next step. And so I'd like to really use that connection and hopefully get some of those farmers to get on board with making some videos and doing some stuff. I just joined the NC Agricultural Action Team. So that's, yeah, I'm excited.
Wow, that is such an incredibly perfect story. I can't tell you how happy I am that you told that story. Because what you're illustrating, and I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit, but what you're illustrating is that you have a connection to someone, which is this meat, you know, purveyor, that goes up the daisy chain to the suppliers, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there, it can, you know, then it could go to the organization that kind of brings all those different farmers together, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what might seem like a tiny little connection actually could be the key to getting our bill through Congress, right? Like the power of one person like you who makes that connection could be the person who just gets this whole thing going, right? Because we have agriculture in every state, and there's got to be connections like that everywhere, right?
Yep.
So your example is exactly what you know, we've tried to do with this action team, is to try to get people to think about, you know, we don't have to get in front of some CEO of a $500 million company, right? I mean, that would be great. But all we really need to get to is the next person in the daisy chain, right? That leads you up that, you know, up that ladder, right? And so I just think your story was phenomenally great.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that.
Really, really great. And it doesn't everybody just get a sigh of relief? Like, wow, it's not that hard. We just have to talk to the guy who lives next door to me or something like that, right? It's an action that you already have, right? That's the whole last part of my talk. So, okay, so is there anybody else who wanted to say something or add to that list?
Tom,
Yes, Lynn, go
I
ahead.
just have a question. I put something in the chat about the unions. And for example, Chris Smith seemed to have a lot of unions
Yes.
in that
Mhm.
GovTrack.
Yes.
Probably the only thing that's going to help us get union support is jobs. And we always have heard, we've heard for years, millions of jobs with renewables. And is there a resource in our areas that could show us how many jobs and by when? For example, the pipe fitters, I think,
Right.
are needed in making turbines, but I don't know where to find out something really concrete in my congressman's district or in our area. Does anybody have a
Okay.
reference?
So so what I know about, there is a labor action team in CCL. And I can tell you that up until December 22nd of last year, in all the years I've been in CCL, I had no thought about unions because I didn't know anybody in a union really. I do know a couple of people, but I have no connection with that. But when I went to see my congressperson on January 27th, December 22nd last year, he basically said, unions are really important to me. You know, Brian Fitzpatrick is saying this, and no bill will go through Congress without union support. And I'm not really interested in your bill until unions get brought into the conversation, right? So that meant that our whole chapter realized that we needed to learn about unions. We needed to reach out to unions. We needed to understand what their needs were in that kind of way that CCL does that, where we just ask a lot of questions and try not to talk very much. And so, so I actually joined the labor action team as a participant in order to begin that process of understanding that. So that's a great place to start. And it just so happens that one of our Pennsylvania state coordinators is going to be the leader of that action team now, because the gentleman who had been doing it for 6 years has stepped down. So that's a great place to start. And then I think going back to what Sarah said, you know, there's probably somebody that you know, or somebody that you know who knows somebody who's in a union, right? And I know that there's a guy in my neighborhood who is kind of irascible and he scares me, but he's also in an electrical union. So I need to get my fear out of the way, and I need to call him up.
Yeah.
But it's it's like what Sarah said, you just, a person next to you, ask anybody you know, do you know somebody in a union? I really would like to know their opinion about, how we're going to create jobs for them.
I have my husband, Jan, who has something to say about that.
Great, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jan. So besides all this, there are trade associations for wind and solar
Mhm.
And they
Yes.
regularly have reports, and in their reports, they give, job estimates for future projects. And so I don't know to what extent they have information about unions, but anyway, in terms of job creation, that'd be probably a good place to start.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I'll look it up. Thank you.
It's not a simple issue because, like anybody, I don't want to, if I need a job, I don't want to have to move to Maryland or California to get a job, right? I live in Yardley. I like Yardley. My kids are here. We want to stay close by. So creating union jobs really means union jobs that are going to be pretty local to where they are already, and using the skill set that they already have, right? Because it's very hard to get training, and especially somebody my age, that's hard to do. So, it's not just creating jobs in an industry that's hundreds of miles away. It's creating jobs that are really local and good quality, family sustaining jobs. So think about
That's right, local.
something. Yeah, Ted, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I ran into that jobs problem relative to solar and wind. Sussex Technical College has a program for training people to get positions in that area. And we attended a talk from the lady in charge of that program, and she was saying anybody who graduates from our 2-year associate program has a good job walking out the door. We have jobs, people are begging for them, and yet the students aren't coming. There's a problem with communication, getting students to say, okay, I think I'll go to the community college and become a solar installer or somebody who works on wind turbines, and yet they don't come.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. I have a nephew who is he's on the spectrum, and he is in a program very like that down in Philadelphia. And it happens that the way his brain works is perfect for the kind of things that he's interested in. And when they gave him a big toolbox just full of tools, he totally freaked. He really freaked out. It was just so great. And so, it's true. There are really great jobs for lots of people. So
Ted,
we have about.
can I ask Ted a question?
My
Yeah.
comment,
What kind of salaries are they making?
Well, they're talking about 50,000.
Okay.
I mean, it's real money.
I
Yeah,
wanted to ask what Lynn was talking at, because I know in Atlantic City, they're going to be putting in a big wind farm. I was just curious if you knew how many projected jobs that was going to bring to New Jersey.
I don't know, but you would just think about what goes into creating that product, right? So you're going to need a lot of concrete, you're going to need a lot of steel, you're going to need a lot of fiberglass, you're going to need a lot of engines and all those kind of parts that come from that. So it's not just the fact that a couple of guys, a team of people are building this thing out in the ocean. It's all those products are coming from, places all around the United States, not to mention the truckers who are going to be trucking all that stuff down there. The crane operators, a friend of mine is a union crane operator. And, it just ripples through the economy when you start thinking about it. And those are good jobs. I mean, my friend makes good money anyway. So I'm gonna have to close.
Sounds like talking to those trade groups. It was mentioned earlier that they know what the expectation is coming up for some of these jobs.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna, kind of go into the last section of my talk and our conversation really. And that is where to find grass tops. We've already talked about that a lot. But I want to tell you a little story. It's very similar to what Sarah just said. That's why I was so excited about what she said. But and then just some suggestions about places that we could all, put some effort into. So my wife has a small organic farm, and on the farm they have some solar panels, and a very small solar company in Yardley was invited to come over and do some repair work on that. And I actually had met the co-owner of the business, a woman named Dara, because she had invited me to her synagogue last year to give a talk and show a film about climate change. So I was thinking about Grasstops recently, and it just popped into my head. I've known this person for a while, but it just popped into my head that, wow, she should be endorsing our bill. I mean, she should go on the innovation .org website and she should sponsor this bill, right? So where is she? She's in my phone. I have her phone number in my phone. So I thought, okay, so I've looked up her email address, company email address, and I sent her an email while I was doing a bunch of other stuff, probably CCL stuff, right? So 15 minutes later, and I said, hey, Dara, you're in solar and, I know you're supportive of our bill, so, or the concept of it, right? So would you mind going to the Energy Innovation Act.org website and become a sponsor of it, right? Literally 15 minutes later, she types me back an email, says, I just did it. I just signed up. I just sponsored your bill. So you can see why, what Sarah said a minute ago resonated with what I'm talking about. So if you get your phone out and just pick a letter and just bring up all the S's or all the U's or all the E's, everybody whose last name starts with me. You don't have to do it right now, but if you want to, go ahead. And just read down that list and think, I know this person. Do they know, are they in an industry that, is affected by climate change? Or would they know somebody? Are they part of an association? Are they in a union? Are they, whatever? And just call them up and start a conversation with them about, hey, we're concerned about this. And do you know anybody that's, impacted by climate change or in an industry that would be benefited by some kind of thing like that? And get that daisy chain going, right? Because I think you'll find that if you just look within your own community, you're going to see that there are connections that could be made. And, it's a safe way to do that. The other thing I was going to mention, I don't know if this was mentioned, but local organizations like the Rotary Club. Now, we gave a talk at the Rotary Club, I don't know, last year sometime, maybe in January before COVID. And what I did not know about Rotary is that Rotary clubs themselves cannot endorse a bill, but the individual people who are members of a Rotary are typically business people, and their business could do that. And we made the mistake of giving the talk and then, kind of thinking that they would get back to us. And it didn't happen until recently. They did ask us to come back and give an updated conversation. But I think we know better now that we're really talking to the individual people, not to the Rotary as a whole, because the Rotary as a whole is not going to endorse our bill, as far as I can tell. But that's a good place to find people who, we're going to have to ask them questions instead of talk so much, ask them about, hey, in your world, what kind of impacts are happening to your businesses? And try to get a conversation going within that group rather than just presenting all this information. Then other groups or associations that are active, I happen to be doing a little research about in New Jersey recently, and I came up with the Jacques Cousteau National Estuary Research Reserve, which is down along the coast, and also the Barnegat Bay Partnership, which is also does research, but also kind of coordinates lots of different organizations. And so I sort of daisy changed my way along websites there, and it turned out that they were having a conference the next day, which I signed up for, about the impacts of climate change and climate communication that they're trying to get going, because they know that the public in general kind of is tone deaf to it, and they wanted to figure out how do you communicate about climate change issues that are happening in that bay and at that Estuary Research Reserve. So there's another whole set of people that are already like-minded with us, right? And they may have connections in those communities that we're talking about that we could leverage. So by getting involved with, listening into their talk, then that sort of gives you the right to send them an email and, get a conversation going. I recently did that when I was on a webinar that had to do with a bay in Alaska, Bristol Bay in Alaska, and the presenter of this talk happened to be working for an organization that is in Virginia. So I typed her an email afterwards, and then I actually had a half an hour conversation with her on the Zoom last week about it. Now, they're not allowed to sponsor bills, but again, she gave me a lot of information about one of the caucuses in the Congress. It's called the Estuary Caucus. And she also gave me insights into how to look up organizations like that have to do with, let's say, fishing, things like that. So it turns out there's something called the Jersey Coast Anglers Association, which I had never heard of. But because I daisy chained with that organization, that talk in Alaska, I got myself to the website of the Jersey Coast Anglers Association. And one of the groups that they mentioned was the Barnegat Bay Partnership. And then I was able to take the class. I mean, you see what I mean? You just kind of go for it. And, you're having fun learning things, but you're also getting nearer and nearer and nearer to that contact. So here's another one. My wife's fourth cousin is a very good friend of our family. And I'm looking at my phone here for the time. And he happens to have a boat down in on Brant Beach on Long Beach Island. And so I called him up because we've been on his boat. It's a little sailboat. And I asked Ted, would you mind, getting in touch with the manager of your marina? Because I'm sure there's a CCLer in that area who might be interested in talking to them about what the impacts of climate change have been on his marina. And maybe he's part of a group of marinas that could be influential with their local council or, their congressman, right? And so Ted is going to get back to me with some of that information. But again, it's just connections. It's just connections with people that that know other people, particularly if they have a business relationship with them, that can get you, get that daisy chain going and may lead you to that critical, important piece of information that's going to, make all this happen. So I wanted to, that's the last thing I wanted to share with you is that, if you were in any of the conferences yesterday, that we have some really phenomenal action teams that can help you get the resources you need, the education you need to really get in front of anybody. One of the ones that I use a lot is called the Presenters and Schedulers Action Team. And they have a lot of PowerPoint presentations all ready to go. You can add a couple of your own slides or they can help you modify them if you're going to be in front of a group or something like that. There's also, yesterday, there was a wonderful talk by the Business Climate Leaders Action Team. And they're typically looking at bigger businesses, but they also are interested in the smaller businesses that we've been talking about. And their PowerPoint yesterday was phenomenally well done and really complete. And that saves us from having to do all that work because it's already out there. And you can contact them or call them and if you find out something that you need help with, and they will provide you the training or even help you move forward and be with you when you meet with the Grasstops people that you want to meet with. And then I mentioned this before, but just one more time. if you go to the action team list, that big list that I showed you on community, and just find an organization in there, an action team in there that resonates with something that you're already doing in your life that you feel passionate about, and meet, go to their meetings a few times and meet those people, because they're going to be everywhere. I have met so many neat people in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, the Midwest. And as soon as COVID is over, we're going to go on a drive and go meet some of these people, which I actually have done when I've gone down along the seacoast and met people in Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, places I'd never gone to, all CCLers. And it's just phenomenally great. So I just want to put the emphasis on, we as a group, we are a living body, right? We are a gigantic organism. And the more that we intersect and work with the people in our chapter, but also other people who have similar interests, CCLers in other chapters around the country, and learn from them, then I think the faster we will, reach our goal. So with that, I would just ask if there are any other questions that you might have, or any other observations. If not, you can always find me on the member list of CCL. My email address is very, very easy. It's my name, Tom Wells, ccl@gmail.com. Tom Wells, ccl@gmail.com. And if there are no more comments or questions, I just want to thank you very much for entertaining me and my ideas today, and really looking forward to working with you in the future. And if you feel like it, you could join the action team and we'll get together a lot more.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks.
team.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you to Ryan and Boy and Ren and Amanda and Karen for all their help. And we'll post the stuff that Karen wrote down on the internet.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.